Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles. The Free Lawyer Podcast is designed for the lawyer, entrepreneur, or professional who is in some way unfulfilled, stressed, or stuck and is looking for something better. We will discuss various blocks that limit us from achieving the personal freedom that we all desire but have not yet fully experienced. And we will give actionable steps to free yourself from them. Are you looking to achieve a new level of success? If so, this podcast is for you. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of The Free Lawyer. And as always, I want to thank you so much for all of your support. So many of you have written nice reviews, given us ratings. I really appreciate that. If you like what you hear here, do me a favor and leave a rating and review of the podcast. I would appreciate it. And it helps our podcast be seen by more people. And that's what I'm all about, getting this message out to more people. And today's message is particularly important to me and to you, because we talk a lot about mental health in the legal profession. And you know how important that topic is to me. And today I'm really honored to have Bruce Simpson with me. Bruce is an incredible attorney in Kentucky, been practicing for quite a while. He's very experienced, but he had his own mental health challenges that took him to the very brink of suicide. And he's going to tell you that story today. And, you know, I remember looking at the ABA article about mental health and the amazingly high percentage of lawyers who had suicidal thoughts. And to me, I found it just devastating. And I think we as a profession owe it to ourselves to get on a better track. And Bruce has been so kind and so vulnerable as to be willing to share his story here of his mental health challenges and his recovery and how he tries to help attorneys today. So with that introduction, Bruce, welcome to the Free Lawyer.
Gary, thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you for being here. And Bruce, tell me a little bit about your background in law and your career as a trial lawyer.
I've been practicing 41 years in Lexington, Kentucky. I practice all over the state, in other states by affiliation with other firms in those states, state and federal court. Most of my civil litigation practice has focused on civil rights litigation, discrimination based on age, race, national origin, handicap, sex. I also do general civil litigation and other matters. I used to do a lot of medical negligence cases, nursing home litigation, and personal injury. In the last 20 years or so, it's my career's kind of moved toward more land development, fighting over the development of land, representing developers, representing objectors. We have a lot of land use battles in Kentucky over preservation of horse farms. Green space, at least in central Kentucky where I live. Gotcha. So it's been varied, but I've enjoyed my practice really for 41 years. I love being a lawyer. I still get thrilled when people call me to be their lawyer. And the truth of the matter is, I don't share this with any of my potential clients or existing clients, but in some of the cases, I would, if I had the money and it was ethical to do so, I would pay the client to let me represent them.
Well, I love your passion for helping and serving your clients.
Well, it comes naturally. It's not contrived, and I'm fortunate that I found my niche in terms of my vocation in life. I really am.
Well, you live in a beautiful area. I've been to Kentucky. I have my daughter and son-in-law live a little west of you in Kentucky, but I've been to Lexington and surrounding areas. It's a beautiful, beautiful green space, and I love it. I know that your practice, though, through your practice, you developed some problems with depression. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my depression, a couple of things. I never believed I had a mental health problem. I always believed I had a Bruce Simpson personal inadequacy problem, starting from when I was a little boy. I was never good enough. And I just thought that was me. It was something that I just had to live with and cope with as best I could. And it didn't matter how well I did, whatever I did, it was never good enough. And I've carried that with me all my life. I still have a battle with it.
And you know,
But
it's funny. I talk to a lot of lawyers, and so many of us struggle with self-doubt. I mean, I know I was a very, very good trial attorney, managed my own firm, and yet I question myself too. And I don't know where that, I do know where it comes from. It comes from the competition we face, the fact we compare ourselves to others, but it creates a lot of stress on us, feeling we're not good enough, doesn't it?
there's multiple sources, multiple reasons. Some of it's upbringing, how you were raised. Um, One of the things I've learned over the last year and a half or so has been, if you're going to be a parent, love your child unconditionally. Don't love them only when they perform to your level of satisfaction, and not love them when they don't. I think that's a very important feature of parenting. But unfortunately, in our society, we license and regulate every human activity that has foreseeable dangers put upon the public.
Right.
To drive a car, practice law, practice medicine, regulate certain kinds of machinery, fly a plane, etc. But one of the most important roles we have in life, being a parent, nurturing an infant from birth up until adulthood, we don't have any regulations, no meritocracy. You don't have to pass or prove your competency to do anything. You just do it like however you feel, however your parents raised you. It's totally open-ended. And so many of our problems in society and personally with individuals come from, in my judgment, lack of proper parenting from age, from birth up until young adulthood at least. But
Yeah.
everybody's got
So
their own
tell me
story.
about that. I know you struggle with depression, and you told me a lot of that comes from sort of doubting yourself. But tell me what happened with that. Tell me about your journey with that challenge.
Sure. Well, I had a great deal of lack of confidence in myself as a lawyer, even though I'd been practicing about 10 years at the time. And then I started to have what other people viewed as success, and it was success. I won, some significant cases, high-profile cases that got a lot of news media coverage, and people would say, "Bruce, man, I saw you on television, and you did a really good job in that case." And I would say, "Really?" And they would say, "Yeah, man, you did great." And it felt good. I finally felt affirmed and worthy as a human being, only because people told me I was a good lawyer. And I would need to hear that every so often, or a bad day would be a bad day for me could be catastrophic. I'd be in the bed 3 days in a fetal position, popping 8 to 12, 16 Excedrin a day for tension headaches, and then suffering major stomach reactions, sometimes having to go to the hospital with stomach bleeding. But that was my inappropriate way of coping. But when I started to practice and having success in my early 40s, and I started feeling well, and that carried for the next really 30 years. And I would
And
read
what
about,
happened? Where were you then? What happened then?
I was in Lexington. I mean, I was in,
No, I mean, where were you emotionally and mentally with your practice then, and how you were
I was in
feeling
good
about
shape. I
things?
mean, I was, feeling worthy. Clients were calling me. It was nice to feel appreciated, and my confidence was building. And that's when I finally started to feel worthy, I realized I couldn't lose this. And I would read about other lawyers that would get into trouble from time to time for one criminal reason or some disastrous wrong thing that they did. Not that I would ever do anything like that, but it just occurred to me, I would read about these lawyers whose reputation was ruined forever because of this wrong thing that they did. And I would think to myself, man, I said, man, if that was me, I couldn't live with that. I mean, I'd kill myself. There'd be no way I could survive. Now that I'm finally feeling good about myself and feeling appreciated, I couldn't bear that kind of a humiliation. And for the truth of the matter is, for the next 30 years, after people started to tell me I was a good lawyer, and I felt self-worth from their compliments and their affirmation of my performance, I knew that if my reputation in the eyes of others was ever threatened, seriously, I couldn't live with it. I could not survive. And I was prepared to kill myself for 30 years. I was just waiting for the right triggering event for that to happen. And It
So
took
you
30
got
years,
you
but it
felt good
finally
when you
happened.
got affirmations from other people who complimented you on your success, your good results, but you weren't able to create those feelings about yourself. You weren't able to see yourself that way. It had to come from someone else.
Yeah, I never actually believed what they were saying. I thought I was fooling them.
Right.
I was faking them out. I really wasn't as good as they thought I was or as smart as they thought I was. But I didn't tell them that, but I felt it personally that because, if you feel worthy from a child on the way, all the way up to adulthood, you're not likely to change that just because of what other people say.
Right.
You just say, well, that's good. I feel good and I don't want to lose this in the eyes of others. If I'm faking you out, all the more better.
Right. And for those of you who are listening, I've heard what Bruce is sharing so much. In fact, I felt that way a lot too. That at times I felt like I was fooling people or faking them, despite the many compliments that I might have gotten on my success and the results. And I'll bet some of you have felt that way too. And that is something that can be addressed and can be improved. So Bruce, was there a triggering event that brought you to the brink? And what happened then?
Yeah, I had some health problems in 2022. I had diagnosed with a heart problem. I got hospitalized. They put me on a blood thinner. One of the consequences of taking blood thinner, which I didn't know at the time, was you have to be very careful not to fall or injure yourself because it exacerbates the potential for internal bleeding.
Right.
And in May of 2022, I fell, sustained a brain bleed. I was in ICU for a couple of weeks. I was in the hospital 4 more times in 22 because of that. But I'd come back to work and I would feel like I was, making progress, doing well, a little bit slower. I was on some medication, but I was still functioning. At least I thought I was.
Right.
And this until January of 2023, when I opened the mail
What happened?
from the Kentucky Court of Appeals and read a decision that reversed a trial court victory, an upset victory, a high profile case that I'd won at trial, but I read in the opinion that I'd not filed a brief in the case. I was stunned, shocked. I'm like, what do you mean I didn't file a brief? I won this case. Of course I filed a brief. And I checked and I didn't. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. One of the things that I didn't appreciate at the time is that the brain bleed has an impact on short-term memory loss. And I had simply just forgotten to file a brief in this high-profile case. But when I read that opinion, I knew immediately because my 30-year plan to kill myself in the event that my self-worth as affirmed by others was ever threatened, that this was that triggering moment. And I was prepared to execute the plan I'd had in place for 30 years, and I proceeded to do so.
So despite your incredible success throughout your career and you had this medical setback, you didn't file a brief in a case that was very important to you and very successful. And because you didn't file a brief, that's the reason the court ruled against you.
That's correct.
And you blamed yourself for that, and that took you to the brink.
I've always, one of the other things that I've suffered from, which other lawyers suffer from, is perfectionism.
Yes.
I had to be perfect as a lawyer, and anything less than perfect was unacceptable. I'd never hurt a client in my life. I didn't necessarily win all the cases, certainly not. But I always did my very best and then some. I double, triple, quadruple checked everything I did to make sure I was prepared. I've always been prepared. I've never walked into a courtroom, any hearing when I haven't been 100% ready to go. And it was really fear of failure. A lot of it was, but it didn't matter because I was always ready. I didn't have to look at notes and I was ready to go. But in this instance,
So just
I just
to
forgot.
highlight what you're saying, the fear of failure, the perfectionism, the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, all teamed up to bring you to the point where you were considering ending your life.
And I wasn't considering, I was committed. I've been committed for 30 years. Once I finally started to feel worthy as a human being at my early 40s, I never wanted to lose that, even if it was only based on what other people thought about me.
Mm-hmm.
And
So what happened next? Did you actually try to carry out that plan?
Well, my plan was to go buy a gun. I hadn't fired a weapon since I was in the Army 50 years ago, and went to a gun shop. I asked to buy the most powerful handgun they had. They sold me a 38 Magnum with hollow point bullets. I didn't want to make any mistakes. I wanted to be successful. I did not want to survive and be in a nursing home and be dependent and have family members have to come and feel obligated to be with me. And I wanted it over, and I was determined to end my life. There was no doubt in my mind about it. To me, at that time, I wasn't crying. I wasn't any gnawing and gnashing of teeth. It was just business. I'd been planning this for 30 years, and it was my time to die.
You
I
had
didn't want
family, you
to,
have
but I didn't have
family,
any choice.
you have family, married, children, etc.
I'm sorry?
You have family, married,
Yes,
children.
I have 2 daughters and a wife I love dearly, but I thought I had that my mistake had not only ruined my career, but that the stigma that would attach to me and my mistake would also taint them, that they would no longer be proud of me, they would no longer respect me like they had, that they would have to carry that same scarlet letter that I would have to bear because of my mistake, because I was no longer a good lawyer in the eyes of other people. And I couldn't bear them carrying that shame that I had put upon them. So in my judgment, thinking through in my own twisted, tortured mind, obviously, that I was better off for everybody dead. There was no doubt in my mind about that when I went about to execute my plan.
So you bought the weapon and the bullets, and you made sure it was powerful enough to do the job. So briefly, tell us what happened. Obviously, you're here today. What happened?
I'm here today by the grace of God, honestly. And I didn't want to kill myself at home and have my wife find me. She was out of town. So I wrote a note to my family, um, left it on the kitchen counter with all my state documents. I had everything planned for them to, quote unquote, make it as easy as possible in dealing with my death. I took an Uber to a cemetery south of Lexington in Nicholasville, Kentucky, because I was going to go to a cemetery so that I was going to call 911 before I killed myself, so a first responder would find me and not some innocent civilian. It was January 25th of 2023. It was about 7 at night. I got out of the Uber, pulled out the gun in the cemetery. I thought to myself, I was a little bit, it was one thing to plan to kill yourself for 30 years and be locked in on the plan, but then it's you and in a cemetery by yourself. And I thought, wait a minute, Simpson, is this really how you want to be remembered? Is this the way you want your life to end? And then I said, okay, let's get back focused. So I wanted to make sure the gun would work. I was only going to pull the trigger once. It was a revolver. I could see all the bullets on the outside of the barrel, and I cocked the hammer of the revolver, saw the bullet rotate into the firing chamber, pointed it to the ground. The gun was loud, a lot louder than the 45 I'd shot in the Army many years ago. Dogs started barking all around the neighborhood of the cemetery. I thought, my goodness, I didn't expect it to be that loud and people are going to come out. So I called 911 and I told them there's a body in the cemetery. The dispatcher asked where. I told her. She said, will you be there to assist the officer? And I said, yes, I will. She said the officer is en route. So I knew my time was coming. So I removed the spent casing from the revolver. I didn't have to. It already had passed the firing chamber. But again, I'm triple checking myself. Put that empty casing in my pocket and pulled the hammer back. I saw the next bullet rotate into the chamber just like the previous one had did during the test firing. And I put the gun to the side of my head and I pulled the trigger. And the
And
hammer hit the bullet and the bullet didn't fire.
wow,
I was dumbfounded. I couldn't comprehend what had happened. And
we have no
I didn't
idea
have,
why the bullet didn't fire. It's just one of those defective bullets or something, huh?
yeah, I don't know what the odds in Vegas are of that happening. I have it just test fired it successfully, and the next live round is in the chamber, and the hammer hits a bullet, and the bullet doesn't fire. I don't know. Nevertheless, I was shocked, and then the police officer I see coming in through the gate. I attempted to pull the trigger again, but honestly, I kind of blinked because I didn't want to shoot myself while the officer was coming toward me. He was about 75 yards away. I quickly put the gun in my pocket after I hesitated about pulling the trigger again, hoping he didn't see it. And he didn't. He pulled up next to me. He rolled the window down. And honestly, I had no contingency lies. I was supposed to be dead. I stammered a little bit and
Did he
apologized.
ask you Did he say he was there he heard about a body? Had you seen a body or anything like that? Or what did he say? What'd you say?
Well, I mean, he'd been notified by the dispatcher there was a body in the cemetery, and that I was going to be there to show him where it was. So before he could say anything, I apologized. I said it wasn't a body. It was a bag. I just didn't have a lie. I wasn't prepared to be talking,
You
honestly.
weren't intending to be talking to him, were you?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't supposed to be. And I didn't know if he'd seen the gun as he was driving up, but apparently he didn't. But then he didn't drive off. He stayed in the cemetery. It was cold. It was 22 degrees, 7 o'clock at night by then. And I had no plans to go anywhere except I wanted to finish what I came down there to do.
So
but he
what
didn't
happened?
leave, and I was cold, and so I started walking out of the cemetery. There wasn't a bar or place I could see across the street, and but I called. Thought occurred to me to call a fellow that I knew in Nicholasville, another attorney who used to be a good friend, but we'd had a case 5 years earlier that was hotly contested, and unfortunately, our friendship got impacted by that. And I hadn't called him in 5 years; we hadn't talked. But I called him, and he answered, and I made up some ridiculous story about having to come to the cemetery in Nicholasville by Uber to meditate about an argument I had with my wife. I had no viable lies to make up. I mean, there wasn't. I usually have 4 or 5 contingencies on anything I'm about to do that I can foresee, but I was supposed to be dead. I had no contingency for this. It was a pitiful lie, what I said, but he said, hey, I'll come over and talk. And we talked for about 3 hours, and I'm sitting there in this bar with a loaded 357 minus 1 bullet. And I never told him I was down there to kill myself or that I had a loaded gun in my pocket. I just said, I was upset with my wife, and we talked, we healed our friendship, and I'm still thinking, are you going to do this, Simpson? All the while we're talking. And in my mind, yeah, I've got to do it. There's no other choice. I can't fix my mistake. I hurt my clients. It's irredeemable. And so I've got to finish it because, there's just no other alternative.
So what happened next?
Got to about 11 o'clock. I said, just take me back to the gas station. I'll take an Uber back to Lexington. It's about 15 miles away. And he said, okay. So he took me back. I got ready to get out of the car. And he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go to get an Uber. And he said, I'll wait. And I said, man, it's 11. Go on home. I'm fine. He said, no, I'll wait. I tried to get out of his car 3 times over the next 20 minutes. And each time he's waiting. He says he's waiting. I wanted to go back to the cemetery and finish what I came to do, was to kill myself.
And there's no Uber coming, so.
Yeah. I mean, when I get locked on, when I'm on to do something, it's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to carry forward because you get locked on. That's just the way I am. Anyway, finally, after 20 minutes, he said, come on, I'll just take you home. So he took me home. We come over the hill in my subdivision, and there's 5 or 6 police cars in front of my house. My wife had found the note. Actually, my phone started blowing up in the cemetery. She'd found the note while I was there. I saw her. She was calling me. My brothers were calling me. My former law partners at the time were calling me. But I didn't want to talk to anybody because I'd reached the point of no return. There was nothing they could say or do.
So you get home and the police cars are there. What happens?
So I said, just don't tell my friend Bruce. He asked me, what the hell's going on? I said, I don't know. I guess Cindy's upset, my wife. And he said, you reckon? And I said, well, just don't stop. Just don't stop. I don't want to get, I didn't tell him I had a gun in my pocket, but I didn't want to get tackled in my front yard with the police with a gun in my pocket. So he drove on up 1.5 miles away. And I said, yeah, I'll walk back. And he grabbed my arm. He said, you're walking back, right? And I said, yeah, I'm walking back. But I wasn't going to walk back. There was a big detention basin nearby. I was going to finish what I started. And I walked into this basin, pulled the gun out for the final time. And then a thought occurred to me, wait a minute. He just brought you 15 miles home. You spent 2 hours with him. You told him you were walking home. You healed your friendship, and now you're going to kill yourself. How's that going to make him feel for the rest of his life? And so I kind of thought, well, hell, I'll have to wait a day or 2. And so I'm walking out of the basin now. What I'm going to say, Gary, I didn't share this until about 6 months ago. I didn't share it for 2 reasons. I wasn't even going to share my story about trying to kill myself until I started feeling better. And I thought I would want to help other lawyers avoid where I went. Because I'd been helped so much by mental health treatment. But I wanted to be credible. I wanted stressed out lawyers and anybody for that matter who was contemplating suicide when they talk to me to say, man, that guy's been there and I believe what he's saying.
Right.
But what I'm going to say is something prior to January 25th of 2023. If someone had told me what I'm going to share with you, I would have never believed it, because I'm like, yeah, okay, bro, I'm just, okay, what are you going to do? Start selling prayer cloths or something like that? Smack me in the forehead to get some guy out of a wheelchair, or smack some other guy out of a wheelchair to get him out of a wheelchair. I'm like, I just not buying what you're selling. I'm talking about televangelists, okay? I had a strong doubt about really God, honestly. And but I get to the top of this base, and what I'm sharing is true. I got no reason to lie. I'm just one thing I've learned in trying cases for 41 years. I'm only as good as the credibility I am as a messenger. I've never distorted the facts. I make arguments to shape a decision, but I don't ever distort the facts.
So what happened when you got to the top of the basin?
Get to the top of the basin, and all of a sudden, I have a complete sense of calm and peace overwhelm me like nothing ever before. Nothing. All that anxiety that compelled me to kill myself was gone. And inside of my head, I hear a very comforting message say, Bruce, you're not going to kill yourself. You're going to be okay. And you're going to be equipped to handle the aftermath of your suicide attempt. You're going to be fine. And the truth of the matter is, with respect to that, I've been fine ever since. Now, I've needed hospitalization and mental health treatment. And I walked home after that. The police had left. They were out looking for me. I called my wife. She came running out the door. We hugged and went inside. She called the police, and the police were there in a pretty short time. Two police cars and a paramedic unit. They checked me out. I told them, I said, I'm fine. I didn't tell them I pulled the trigger. I didn't tell them I tried to get out of that car 3 times or anything else after that. But I told them I changed my mind. I was fine. I'm sorry they came out, because I didn't want to go anywhere. And they said, look, you bought a gun. You went to the cemetery. They traced my internet. They had pinged me in the cemetery. I turned my phone off when I saw everybody calling. If I hadn't turned my phone off, the police would have found me earlier. I turned my phone off, and I said, I apologize. And they said, well, you went so far, and you go that far, there's a high percentage that you're going to try this again. We're going to have to take you to a state psychiatric hospital for 3 days. We need for you to stand up and put your arms against the wall, spread. We're going to frisk you for weapons, which they did. All the things that I ever imagined not having happened to me was being spread eagled in my living room in front of my family while I was getting patted down by police officers for weapons, and then being handcuffed, escorted outside my home in front
of a loaded
of
gun and you had the gun with you.
Put in the back of a police car and taken to a state psychiatric hospital, where I was there for 72 hours. And I was put in an unlocked room. I was checked on every 15 minutes. They had to unlock the bathroom for me to use the bathroom. They had to be in the shower when I took a shower. I met my first mental health professional, Dr. Donald Crow, clinical psychologist at Eastern State Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. And he spent a lot of time with me over the next 3 days, and really delved into my whole history, things that I never thought about, and really started me on the road to recovery.
Wow. That's an amazingly powerful and truly miraculous story. Tell me briefly.
If it hadn't happened to me, Gary, if it hadn't happened to me and somebody told me this story, I wouldn't believe it, honestly. I expect people to be skeptical, but I'm telling the truth. I got nothing to gain. If anything, people will think I'm truly whacked out, but I'm not. I'm thinking better, more clearly than ever, feel better about myself. I've had 3 trials in the last year and a half, which have come easier. I don't have the anxiety overhanging me when I'm speaking in the courtroom. I always thought I did a pretty good job, but I feel like I'm functioning, helping my clients better than I ever have. And
Wow. So tell
honestly,
me,
I
how
just
did
don't want
you?
another lawyer to go down that dark passage to the point of no return. That's all my whole purpose in sharing this is that tell people, look, no one could have been more dismissive about mental health treatment, negative about it, made fun of people in mental institutions than me. But I'm telling you, mental health treatment works. Now, you may have to change therapist. You may have to change medication. I had to change it. You got to be regulated. But I'm just telling you, it works. And you can have a much more enjoyable life. You do not have to languish in depression and misery. You can be helped. And that's my whole message because it's happened to me. Not that I expect everybody to have the same results, certainly not. Some of us are more ill than others. I get it.
Tell me
I've been there.
about your treatment and how it helped you to recover. And sounds like you're in a completely different place now.
I'm in a totally different place, but I'm still in treatment. I don't take anything for granted. I'm constantly evaluating myself, particularly my candor with my therapist. The thing about medication that always bothered me was, having not had any before, is my belief in its effect or its impact was it would just make me high. It would make me have some sense of euphoria, which I didn't want because I had to be on. I had to be on ready to go to war for my clients.
Right.
And that's not the way mental health medication works. There's no sense of any euphoria, no sense of anything.
So the mental health treatment not only helped you, it created a different Bruce. You're much more
Totally.
relaxed, much more confident, much less self-judgmental
Yeah.
than you were before.
And to illustrate your point, which I agree with, Gary, I got invited in May of this year to speak, to be one of the speakers at the 200-year celebration anniversary of Eastern State Hospital, which is in Lexington, which is the longest continuing state-operated state psychiatric hospital in the United States, I should say. 200 years. And the last time I was out there, I was handcuffs and in suicide watch. And then they invited me to speak, 300 or 400 people. And I got to meet with Dr. Crow, the clinical psychologist who first met me. And he made the same comment. He said, Bruce, you're not even the same person that I talked to 18 months ago. And I appreciate him saying that because he was the one that started my recovery. And it's ongoing. I don't take any of this for granted. I was mentally ill for most of my life.
It's a day at a time.
Day at a time. I don't take anything.
And I have a lot of experience, obviously, with folks who recovered from alcoholism or who are in recovery for alcoholism. And the transformation I see in them is simply amazing and miraculous. And in the same way, you practiced law very successfully for many years until this happened, almost 40. And now in just 18 months since, you become truly a different person with a different outlook on yourself.
I've been blessed.
Life, and your practice.
I should also emphasize this, Gary, as to me. Not only was I a naysayer about mental health treatment, I was also the quintessential doubting Thomas about God. I was very dismissive, negative, mocking. I am no longer. And I will say this, as much as mental health treatment has helped me, which has helped me greatly, my growing faith and relationship with God and learning about Scripture and paying attention to two principal authors of books that I rely upon for guidance, Dr. Timothy Keller and Henry Blackaby, both of whom are deceased, by the way, but their work lives on in YouTube and books.
What are the books that what are the titles of the books?
They have two daily devotionals. I spend about 5 minutes a day reading their devotionals. So you can get them on Amazon. They're on Audible. They also have a number of books. But the one thing, once I got better and stabilized with my mental health treatment, I thought to myself, okay, well, what now? Where do I go from here? Do I need to rely upon a psychologist to tell me how to think and what to believe in and what's important? So I avoid the trap that got me in before, where I was worshiping status and affirmation as important gods in my life, if you will. And I found that in studying Scripture and following the Gospels, I have been provided a guideposts for future living. I know what's important. I know what's not. And the things that used to be things that I used to worship, counterfeit gods is what Tim Keller calls it. I don't worship anymore. And I know what's important.
Right. How has what happened to you changed your perspective on mental illness and treatment?
Well, I'm a believer. I mean, there's nothing like an unbeliever getting treatment and having their life changed. If you're a shy, totally afraid, living in fear all your life of being of exposed as a fraud, of being the imposter that you think you are, if you live with that for 73 years like I did, and then you're free from that, I don't know what other evidence you need. My plea is don't wait until you're 73 years old to find your way. Right. You can find it a lot earlier. You can be helped a lot earlier by getting mental health treatment.
There are lawyers listening to you, I know, right now, who struggle with imposter syndrome and self-doubt, who struggle with perfectionism, who struggle with self-judgment. What advice do you have to them to help manage that before it gets them to the place where you were on that fateful day in January of 23?
Well, for one thing, you need to get the perspective of someone other than yourself, because I was my own counselor, my own unqualified, inept therapist. I never shared this with anybody because of the fear of the stigma. Number one, I wouldn't acknowledge I had a mental health problem because I didn't want to accept that label. I had been wearing this false front as a lawyer warrior, and I was putting on a role. It was an artificial role. It really wasn't me, but it was a role that I felt like I had to adapt to be a lawyer. The truth of the matter is, lawyers are human too, as simple as that sounds. We forget about that. And we're just as vulnerable to the same vulnerabilities, mental health wise and physical wise, as the people that we serve.
Right.
You have to recognize you're not invulnerable. You're
right.
not and will never be perfect. And it's okay to reach out for help to get your clarity of thinking straightened out. And you need to have another objective set of eyes and ears to give you that advice, because you're languishing in the wrong thinking. And
right.
you've got to get out of risk.
I like the saying something like, when I'm stuck in my own brain, I'm in a dangerous place. And I think you're right, that finding someone else to talk to, whether it's a colleague like you ended up speaking to that night, or a mentor or a coach or a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist. I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, it does matter, but reach out to someone you're comfortable with, someone you trust, someone you can really share your fears with, and get an outside objective perspective. Because often we put ourselves in this miserable place that isn't real. And talking to someone is so important. Many lawyers feel there's such a stigma about getting treatment for mental health, whether it's depression, addiction, whatever it might be. And I've been sober in recovery for a while, and so I'm familiar with that. But a lot of lawyers feel there's a real stigma. We're supposed to be all powerful. We're supposed to have all the answers. We're supposed to be winners. And there's a stigma some feel to seeking treatment for mental health issues. What could you say to the lawyer who's listening now who says, like, that's a good idea, Bruce, maybe I should get some help, but there's a stigma. I feel like I'll be judged for doing that.
Well, that stigma kept me from acknowledging I had a mental health problem, of dismissing it. And it certainly, I didn't want to go, I didn't trust a therapist. I didn't want someone to even see me going into a therapist office. If I thought about it, I thought I'd have to wear a disguise, because I didn't even want someone to say, or I was afraid who I might see in the therapist office. And I didn't want them to know I felt like I was so weak that I needed mental health treatment. That stigma kept me away. It keeps a lot of people away. It's the biggest impediment to getting well if you're suffering from a mental illness. There's no doubt about that. But I'll tell you this, my first 3 or 4 months after recovery, and I started feeling better. And I went to the Kentucky Lawyer Assistance Program and spoke with Yvette Harrigan, who heads up the Kentucky Lawyer Assistance Program. She's also heads up the American Bar Association's National Committee of all the Lawyers Assistance Programs. And I told her, I said, Yvette, I think I want to help other people. And she said, well, what about writing about it in the ABA Journal or the Kentucky Bar Association Journal? I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That means
I
going
don't want to
public.
help people that much.
I'll never have another client if I go public. No one's going to call me. And, you know, if I've acknowledged I got a 30-year battle with untreated depression and tried to blow my brains out, no one's going to call me. She said, well, that's okay. You don't have to say anything. But then, you know, the more I thought about it, and got better and better, and realized through my reading that stigma is the biggest impediment to people getting help. And also the fact that someone dies by suicide once every 11 minutes in the United
Wow.
States, I
Wow.
found that just stunning. And the fact that lawyers are 2 or 3 times more likely to kill themselves than non-lawyers.
Wow.
I decided to do it. And honestly, when I think back on hearing that message back on January 25th, coming out of that detention basin, that Bruce, you're going to be equipped to handle the aftermath of your suicide attempt, that's been true. So I went public with it. I wrote about it in the ABA Journal in December, a Kentucky Bar Association, in September magazines, and also it was on the front page of my local newspaper in August of last year. And
And what
honestly,
impact, if any, has that had on your practice? In other words, the fear that you had that clients will never come to you again, has that proven true?
has not proven true. I don't even have a website now. I got let go from my previous firm, and I thought, well, you know, I might have to do something else. Okay. But people find me. I'm practicing as a solo. I am busier than I want to be. I've got a backup on every case, actually
Good.
by my former firm.
Well, I
Another
can hear how content and peaceful and happy you are now. And for those of you who are thinking about the stigma, of course it's real. And as Bruce said, it's the biggest impediment to your own health. But you look at the miracle of Bruce's recovery and many others like Bruce, not only from suicide, but from depression or addiction, whatever it might be. And you deserve to be as healthy, successful, and free as you can. Bruce, what ended up happening with that matter that drove you to the brink?
Well, I lost the case. And statute of limitations, I went up and met with my clients once I got released from Eastern State Hospital. Those were the first non-family members that I talked to. And I share with them, I apologize for my malpractice. I know I'd hurt them. I told them no one is more disappointed than me. And I gave them the statute of limitations for filing suit against me. And then I went to the Bar Association and reported what I did to the Bar Association. So I've done everything that I know to do with respect to doing the right thing. And, you know, I'm guided every day about doing the right thing by the Lord who saved me. And whatever happens, happens. I'll be equipped to handle it. And I'm trying to make amends. And obviously that's why I have backup on every case now, so I don't make any more mistakes like that, even though my memory has really almost 100% returned.
Good.
But I double and triple check myself like always, and I have another lawyer on every single case to back me
Bruce,
up.
what strategies do you suggest to the lawyer who feels a lot of stress to manage that stress in a healthy way in their practice?
Well, for the lawyers, every state should have a lawyer assistance program. And I will tell you, those work, and it's confidential. You can go. They cannot report anything to the bar council, any kind of misconduct. It's all confidential. I share with lawyers to go and seek out the resources and help that is there, because you're protected. There's a strong incentive that the Bar Association and the Supreme Courts of various states have recognized that lawyers are human too. Again, as silly as that sounds, but we're 2 or 3 times more likely to die by suicide than non-lawyers. We get stressed out. We're more subject to substance abuse. And the lawyer assistance programs are there to help people like us.
Let me
That would be my
emphasize what
first
Bruce
call.
just said. I had the privilege and the honor of serving the lawyer assistance program in my area, Maryland, for 20 years as the chair of the committee. And they do amazing service. And it is confidential, it is free, and the help could not only save your life, but make your practice as fulfilling as Bruce's is now. Bruce, what advice would you give your younger self about how to practice law, how to live life in a way that is healthier and freer than where you were?
Well, the first thing I would do, obviously, beside the threshold of coming closer to God at an earlier age than I did, but as a young person coming out of law school, I'm like, okay, I should, going back, define success for myself. What really is important? And don't let a law firm define that for you. Making partner, making so much money, getting promoted, all of those things are temporary goals that can get you in a whole lot of trouble. And you wind up comparing yourself with other people. That's the worst thing you can do, I think, as a human being, is to say, well, I'm not as successful as so-and-so, so must not be worthy. That's wrong thinking. You can be very successful. Define your own goals. What's important to you? Is it making money? Is that really going to make you happy? No, because you're never going to make enough. If your self-worth is based on those false notions of success, you're setting yourself up for misery. There's other aspects
great
of
advice.
quality of life, family, caring for others, doing the right thing for the right reason. I did the right thing a lot of times, but I did it for the wrong reason. I did the right thing for self-promotion or for marketing. I'd want to get credit for it so people would think I was trustworthy and credible, but I wanted to get credit for it. And you don't need that. You don't need a lot of the things you think you do to have an enjoyable life, a focused life that's not going to get you in trouble because you keep comparing yourself with others or our culture or advertisers or things like that. Define what's important for you.
Right. I think that, Bruce, I think that's really important. I think so often lawyers take a job because it has the most prestige or the most money, and they get to realize they're miserable because they've never really taken time to think about what's important to them, what their values are, how important is family or time or their hobby or being of service. So I think that's great advice. Bruce, briefly, what do you do today to help people who are struggling with depression or even suicidal thoughts?
Well, I'm a volunteer with the Kentucky Lawyer Assistance Program. I do a lot of public speaking. I've gotten on LinkedIn, which I wasn't involved in until about 6 to 8 months ago. I put myself out there. I put my telephone number on LinkedIn, on my Twitter and Facebook page, and every public speaking engagement that if you're in serious trouble and serious stress, call 988. It's toll free. Those people are professional and they're good. I've called them to evaluate them before I make a referral to anybody.
Right.
But if you just want to talk to somebody who's been to a place you do not want to go, a place where I've been, my number is 859-229-3436, 859-229-3436. What you share with me is confidential. I don't charge. I'm just one human being talking to another human being. I'm no therapist, don't hold myself out to be one. But I've been to a place you do not want to go. And if you want to talk to somebody who's been there and let me convince you not to go there, call me. I don't put it out there lightly. I get calls and I answer them. If I wasn't serious, I wouldn't tell you.
Bruce, thank you very much for that. And I always ask people, where can they get in touch with you? So Bruce has just told you, look for him on LinkedIn. He gave you his phone number. He's here to help as a friend, as a colleague, as a professional lawyer, not as a therapist. But his main advice was reach out to someone. And if you're afraid to reach out to someone else, give Bruce a call, because his passion now is helping people who were where he was until intervention occurred. And now he has a life of true freedom. And, I call this podcast The Free Lawyer, and Bruce has an entirely different outlook now on his life and his practice through what happened to him. And he's here to help and support you. Bruce, thank you so much for your time today, and particularly for your vulnerability and sharing where you were and what happened and where you are now.
Gary, thank you for inviting me. It's not about me. I've been empowered to do this, honestly. The old Bruce Simpson before January 25th of 2023, I would have covered this up. No one would have known about it, I can assure you. But I'm grateful to be here. I don't want anybody to go where I went. That's my sole purpose. If I can help deter you in any way, then I have been helpful. And that's really all I'm about. That's all it is.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for listening today. It was a longer episode than typical, but it was so important and so profound and so real and so human. And Bruce, thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty in sharing your story with us and all your service to the legal professional community.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for being here. Please, if you're struggling with anything, give your lawyer assistance program a call. Talk to a colleague who you know, like, and trust, and get the support that you deserve, because there's always an answer and there are always people willing to help. Have a great day. And as always, please be well, be safe, and be free. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Free Lawyer Podcast. Wherever you are listening, if you enjoyed what I shared, please leave me a rating and review. I would appreciate hearing more about what you like best and what topics you might like me to cover in future episodes. If you are interested in experiencing a more fulfilling and a more successful life, please contact me at www.garymiles.net, where you can schedule a free discovery call with me so I can learn more about you, your challenges, and your dreams. I appreciate each and every one of you, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks to all of you for your support.